Hello everyone, today we're diving into part 2 of our supervision series, focusing specifically on unsupervised training. While supervised training is often the headline of AI, unsupervised learning is where the system truly begins to explore data on its own. To understand where we're going with unsupervised learning, we first have to look at where we've been in our previous video. In supervised learning, the training set we feed the algorithm includes the desired labels. Essentially, we give the computer the answer key. In unsupervised learning, however, it's the opposite. The training data is completely unlabeled. Think of it this way: the system is trying to learn without a teacher. It looks at the raw data and asks itself, what is the structure here? Because there are no labels, we use different tools to make sense of the information, and the tools we're going to be covering today are here. I'll go through them one by one. Let's start with clustering. Imagine we have a massive amount of data about this video's viewers, and in future, I would like to make more targeted videos. Our goal would be to detect groups of similar visitors so we can create those targeted videos for them in future. Crucially, we don't tell the algorithm which group a visitor belongs to, because how would it know? It has to find the connections in the attributes of each viewer and create patterns entirely on its own. So an example of clustering is something called hierarchical clustering. This image illustrates that in action. You can see how the algorithm has taken a disorganized field of data points and sorted them into distinct, what we call neighborhoods, based on their proximity and their traits. For example, it has identified that the yellow squares share a commonality, the blue share a commonality, and the red share a commonality. And that allows us to see the shape of our audience without having labeled them beforehand. Next, we have visualization. The reality is that humans don't really understand algebra or numbers. We need graphs to truly understand complex maths. In this process, we feed the algorithm a massive data set, and it converts that data into a graphical representation that can be and is easily plotted. This helps us understand how data is organized and reveals patterns that would be invisible if this had been on a standard spreadsheet. Here's a real-world example of high-level visualization. Each color represents a different topic or cluster. And by plotting it this way, we can see which groups are related to one another. For example, clusters that are very close, like the blue and yellow here, are more likely to be similar in characteristics than those on opposite sides, like this purple and this red. Sometimes our data sets actually have too much information about each item. While the data might be important, it can be overwhelming for a system to process. Overwhelming for computer, or even overwhelming for humans. Dimensionality reduction simplifies the data without losing the core information. There's two broad steps to this. First is finding data that correlates, which means if one particular attribute increases and another increases at the same time, that's a correlation. Or if one decreases and another decreases at the same time, that's also correlation. And then the second is to merge those correlated attributes into a single representative is important, feature. A great example is a tumor biopsy, which contains 20,000 genes for each cell. And there's so many hundreds of thousands or millions of cells in each biopsy. By reducing the dimensions, we can group genes with similar expressions. So in genetics, expressions is how they show in humans. And we can group genes with similar expressions and turn them into one representation. As you can see in this diagram, we can take a complex 3D cube and project it down into a 2D plane, or even a 1D line, and that makes the underlying patterns much easier to analyze and compute. For example, if each of these circles was a different gene, but we realized that the red broadly mean the same thing, and the blue mean the same thing, and the yellow mean the same thing, then all we would need is one line like this to differentiate them. Anomaly detection is one of the most practical uses of unsupervised learning. A classic example is detecting unusual bank transfers, which could indicate fraud. During the training phase, we show the system mostly normal instances, and because it learns what this normal looks like, it can immediately flag anything that deviates from that pattern and label it an anomaly. This is also closely related to novelty detection, where the system identifies entirely new patterns it hasn't seen before. So instead of just the anomalies, it finds new patterns of anomalies. Finally, we have association rule learning. This method discovers relationships between the attributes of the items themselves instead of the actual items. As a medical student, a prominent example for me is its potential use in electronic health records. The system could look for if-then patterns. It might discover that patients prescribed a specific antihypertensive, which decreased blood pressure. A specific antihypertensive medication could frequently develop a secondary need for potassium supplements. And we could infer that it could be due to a specific side effect. This connection that antihypertensives led to the need for potassium supplements could have taken years for humans to detect manually.